In this video, you're going to learn about the power of effective questioning and how to ask better questions. And stick around to the end to learn about how to ask better questions of younger athletes. Okay, let's crack on with it. Okay, so we were covering earlier on when I was asking about goals, we were covering asking questions of our athletes. And
Yes.
You've said that for a coach, knowing the question is every bit as important as knowing what the answer to that question is. So
Yeah.
can you explain what you mean by that and how us coaches should or can come up with better questions?
Okay. So, in terms of how coaches can come up with better questions, I think I don't want to keep plugging my book, but my book or something a similar book that goes through. There's a series of questions. There's a model for asking questions in NLP. It's called the meta model. I think in the book I call it power questions. So there are questions that can help elicit useful information. For example, if you're doing the goal setting, there are a series of questions to find out what the client really wants, what the athlete really wants. Depending on what, if someone says, I can't do that, there are some useful questions. For example, what stops you from doing it? Or how do you know you can't do it? So there are certain questions which are going to be helpful depending on what the athlete has said or the actual situation. So I can't go through every single scenario.
No, I wasn't expecting that. So let me give you an example from my coaching. So
sure.
At the moment I coach athletes who are competing on a national level. It's been a low performing squad for a number of years, a long time, and I took it over a couple of years ago. I have coached athletes who have rowed for their national team and that kind of stuff, and no matter who the kind of the caliber of athlete that I've been coaching, sometimes I've asked them a question and got a completely blank look, whether they are brand new to the sport or they've won a medal at the world champs. So how do I know how to ask that question in a better way?
Well, firstly, maybe it was not a bad question at all. Maybe it was actually a very good question that they couldn't answer there and then, or that they didn't want to answer in front of other people.
Okay. That's interesting.
So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't know the specifics.
So let me make it even more specific for you. Often, I ask my athletes, how they feel when they're doing a particular technical aspect of the rowing stroke, and often they can't explain it to me.
Okay. So how do they feel? There's different meanings. It could be, or different possible interpretation. It could be how do they feel emotionally. It could be where do they feel it in their body? What do they feel in their body? Mm-hmm. So perhaps, what sort of information do you actually want to get from them?
From my athlete?
Yeah, by asking that question. What's your intention of that question?
So what I'm trying to get at is actually not the emotional feeling. It's the physical feeling of doing a particular technical aspect of the rowing stroke. Way A, which is inefficient, and way B, which is more efficient.
Got it. Okay, so to ask questions such as, what's the difference in your body, how your body responds to stroke A compared to stroke B? If you want to get it even more specific, so what does it feel like in your arms?
Okay.
Now, I don't like necessarily asking leading questions, but sometimes you could say things like, does it feel tight? Does it feel loose? So to say, does it feel tight is a bit of a closed question, and it could be a leading question. Whereas if you give them, in my experience, if you give them different examples, like a range of answers, they can then get an idea of what you mean and they can start responding. So how do you feel in your arms? Do your arms feel tight? Do they feel loose? Do they feel heavy? Do they feel light? Do they feel strong? Do they feel weak? So you're giving them a sort of a parameter, a framework to answer the question. And then they can start telling you. Does that give you
Yeah,
So sometimes to ask, to suggest stuff, but suggest a range of things as opposed to just one, or to get specific with a question.
is it just a trial and error method? You know, if I ask a question and I get a blank stare, do I then try, 15 other ways of asking the same thing? Or is there some way that I can be more targeted with the way I'm asking maybe a particular person? Should I be taking notes as to what works with a particular athlete?
Well, that's interesting. That's one way of doing that as well. And knowing it depends on the group and their age, I guess. I'm going to massively generalize here, James.
Go for it.
Some, if I think back to when I was sort of, 12, 13, 14, 15, sometimes adolescent boys, and maybe girls as well, they feel awkward talking about things like that in front of other people. So maybe you need to give them a range of possible answers, so they know what you mean by that, by the question, or perhaps do it on a one-to-one.
Okay.
So I think it's about, in principle, it's about what information do you want to actually get, and to ask a question that gives you the best chance of getting that information and having a backup or two.
To learn more about how to coach and how to get better at this stuff, then click into this playlist right here. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. I've been James Parris. I'll see you next time.